Nikki here with my latest pattern, which is the Lugo Tote. So, it is a jumbo size tote. I know this isn't jumbo, this is the sample that was made for the tutorial, but this is the original size. It is an oversized tote. I believe the dimensions are 23, 22 by, I believe 17 by 5. So it's a pretty large tote, and I love it. It has these circular handles. It has the hardware, and of course, because you're making it yourself, you can put whatever hardware you want. But the whole premise of the design is kind of like the bottom here, and then you have the feet that's on the bottom, the extra like protection here. It's more so for design, to be completely honest. It has these magnet closures on the side. There's also a closure here on the inside. So when you carry it, you have the option to carry it wide or fold those in like so. But it's just a really cute bag. It's pretty simple to make as well. And so I like to tell everyone this, like when you're making something and you want it larger or you want it smaller, just change the scale. Unless it says specifically that you cannot change the scale, then you can change the scale. But with my patterns, I do allow for the change of scale so that you can make it smaller. So this is 75% of the original size, which is, again, so super cute too. So this pattern can be made with, I love jute. Like, I'm in my jute era for real. Like, I love it so much. And it's just perfect for like summer and just like really warm weather. But we also have this, which is stunning. It's a blue suede with leather at the bottom. It's really heavy too because I lined it with a canvas, like a heavy canvas. But again, just a gorgeous bag. You can make it, you know, larger. So just a really great tote. So let's get to the pattern. So of course you're going to need whatever fabric that you're going to be using, whether it's going to be a fabric or a leather or a suede. I've made it with all textiles, like pretty much everything. Even this one is made with the jute as well as the suede at the top. So the pattern is, I believe, 8 pieces. It's going to print out in 30 pages. I know that sounds excessive, but they're large pieces of paper. So once you get them tiled out, it's not like a million pages. It's, you know, 8 pieces, and they're really self-explanatory. Now, I like to say this with all my patterns with Aviano bags. All the patterns that I release will come the day of release with a tutorial. And it's a step-by-step detailed tutorial, including the sewing. So when I've made patterns and tutorials in the past, you know, I'll do the tutorials and I like to think that they're very detailed, but I don't show as much of the sewing. I know how important, especially making a bag, that showing the actual sewing portion is really important as well. So it's all the sewing is done on camera as well, sped up a bit because it would be a 5-hour video. But this is a rated easy pattern because it is relatively easy. And from beginning to end, it would take maybe around 2 hours or so. But yes, so what you'll need, you will need magnets, the magnet closures. You'll need 3 of those. You will need the hardware if you're making it directly out of the box, right? You'll need the hardware. You'll need 6 pieces of rivets, screw-in grommets, whatever you decide to use. You'll need 4 for the bottom. You'll need, of course, the fabric, whatever fabric you're going to use. And for this jumbo tote, it is, you're going to need at least a yard. And with a minimum of 23 inches wide. So when you're working with leather, it's not going to come in a yard like you would normally do. But I'm telling you a yard just so that you can get a visual of how it's supposed to look or how much you're going to need. So yeah, you're going to need at least a yard, 23 inches wide at a minimum. You're going to need, so here's the thing, when it comes to making a bag stable, this is jute. So I layered the jute with 2 different layers of jute, but I also used some stability in there so that it sits up by itself with no problem. So I do go over that in the video as well, just kind of like some options you can use. I'll tag all of the supplies and the tools that I use, the tools that I use, and then alternative tools that you can use as well, that you can just order them off Amazon with no issue. And you will need just, yeah, the feet. I like flat feet. Many people don't, because I don't necessarily want it to sit off the table. And of course, we know that that's the purpose of the feet, is that they'll sit off of the floor, sit off of the table. But I like them flat for some weird reason. But of course, you'll need the 4 feet, you'll need the stability, you'll need the Texan stabilizer, and of course, whatever fabric you're going to use. If you're going to use just regular fabric, you have that option as well. If you have a regular sewing machine, so you're not using any type of industrial or heavy duty sewing machine, this is a perfect pattern. I actually made this one on my Bernina, which is not a heavy duty sewing machine. And because I used the suede at the top and suede at the bottom, I didn't use like a heavy duty, but I did use a stabilizer. So I will go over the fact that you will have to trim your stabilizer down, and it will go through any type of machine. It's really nice, this one, for just a regular home sewing machine. I think that is it. So the lining, I used a pigskin for the lining, and for the pocket that's inside, the pattern comes with 2 pockets. For the tutorial, I only did 1 pocket, but it's a jumbo pocket as well. And I just made the pocket with leftover suede that I have. But I am a fan of using pigskin for the lining. It's extremely tough, and it just looks really good. It looks really good. So I believe that is it. If you have any questions, any comments, any concerns, let me know. Happy sewing. Okay, so we want to start with the front and back piece. So I'm using this as my front and this as my back. And as you can see, I've already gone ahead and I've made the markings. And these are going to be the markings for the magnetic clasp that's going to go on the side of the bag. So I have the markings. Now I'm going to go ahead and insert these clasps.
Motion detected at front door.
I'm just going to try to do the placements so I can see where it is. It's a lot more difficult working with the jute because you can't puncture it and see it much on the other side. All right, so I want to make sure this is centered. And this, you have to make sure this is even because you want the clasp to match up evenly so that you can properly close the bag. So I'm seeing this is kind of tilted. Let's see if that's going to make a difference. I'm going to move this down a bit. Okay. So when you're using jute, because there's shift in it, you want to make sure that these are lining up. All right, so we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Okay, so again, keep in mind, if you're using a fabric or something that's not leather or suede, it tends to shift, so you just have to check and double check to make sure it's lined up. Okay, so we have these installed. Now what we're going to do is we're going to place these across the top. So I'm just going to use the double-sided tape. If you don't have double-sided tape and you want to use the glue, you can do that as well. But I'm going to use this. Or if you don't have either, that's fine. Just use clips to kind of secure it in place. And you're going to put this right across the top. You want to do it right at the edge. But I want to clean this up before I put this on here. And another step, if you're using something like a jute, I went ahead and I applied glue, the water-based glue around the edges. So it's a bit tacky, but it also seals these edges. Because this type of fabric tends to unravel, so you want to make sure that it's secure. So just kind of trim off any like stragglers on here. Okay. And you want to bring it up just a bit. So you don't want it exactly even with the top. You want to make it a little higher. So you want to place it right here. You want to do that on both sides. Now we're going to go ahead and stitch. And then we want to do a second row here. So another thing to note, make sure if you're using a regular sewing machine that you have your stitch length at least a 4.0. If you do it any smaller, it doesn't look as good. It can tend to kind of gather up. So a 4.0 at the shortest. Okay, so we have the stitching done across the top. Now, what you want to do, if your work isn't as like stable and like heavy as you want it to be, I already put 2 layers of this jute. And there's something else that I really love to use, and I'll grab it. So this to me provides like some stability, but also keeps it flexible. And that is this heat bond. So what I like to do is when I put the 2 pieces of jute together, I did it with heat bond. So I like to put another layer of heat bond across the back. Now there are several ways that you can stabilize this. This is what I like when I'm using the jute. Just because I don't want it to be too heavy, too hard, but I still want it stabilized. So I'm gonna go ahead, and all you have to do is just put it across here, cut it out, and then just iron it. Just give it one good iron. Okay, so I ironed the heat bond on, and as you can see, it made it a lot stiffer, which is what you want. And it's just a really easy way to give it some stability without like really changing how it's going to react. So let's go ahead and peel this off. And as you can see, it's just this, and it's kind of like almost like dewy, a dewy feeling. Now, if you are to affix something to this and then iron it again, it will, if I were to put this on and then take some heat to it, it would affix this to this. Just keep that in mind. But it gives it a nice amount of stability, but also able to keep the flexibility. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take the bottom pieces. There's 2 of these. These are called and noted as bag bottoms. We're going to place the bag bottoms So about an inch across the bottom. We're going to do the same distance on each side. So what I'm going to do, instead of using my double-sided tape, I'm just going to go ahead and use the glue. And I'm going to do that so I can see how much glue I'm going to apply and where I need to place the back bottoms. So apply this right across the bottom here. And then press. Don't worry if some of the glue peeked out, especially if you're using the water-based glue, because you can just rub it off and it'll come right off. All right, so we're going to let this sit just for a few minutes, and then we're going to stitch. And when you stitch, you're going to stitch close to the edge here. Just get it as straight as you can all the way across. We're going to do that on both sides. Okay, so we have the bottom stitched on both. Now what you want to do is take these and we're going to line this up and we're going to stitch. And we're going to stitch on the edge and then a second row of stitches here. So with this, we're going to go ahead and use our double-sided tape, and we're going to place it right here. And this is a ½ inch up. ½ inch. Then we're going to remove this. So you're going to place this, which again is a ½ inch up. Okay. And then we're going to stitch close to the edge and then a second stitch next to it. Okay, so we have this stitched. Now what we want to do is do another row of stitching, you can kind of see where the bottom layer has kind of crossed over. You want to make sure you stitch right before that, so right across the top here. Okay, so we have the bottom connected and we have it double stitched. Now what we want to do is we want to take the outer bottom, and this is the bottom half that we're going to, it's almost used as aesthetics, but also to protect kind of like the bottom of the bag and kind of like the seam as well. So we want to go ahead and we want to place this. We want to make sure it's center. So just to kind of find the exact center. Okay. So you can either glue this on or you can use your double-sided tape, and then we're going to stitch around the perimeter. So I think I'm going to use probably the glue. I'm going to go ahead and use the glue. And don't concern yourself with, you know, covering it exactly. Unless you have a leather with weight to it, then you definitely want to make sure you cover it completely. But if you're using a fabric or you're using a suede, don't worry about it, because you also don't want to saturate it so that the glue comes through. And then you want to go ahead and place this. Make sure it's center. And again, if you get some glue on your project, don't worry, because as long as you have the water-based glue, because it will come off with just a couple of rubs. All right, so put this on here. And now we're going to stitch around the perimeter. Okay, so we have this outer bottom stitched. Now we want to turn this to the wrong side. And we want to affix the stabilizer. So I'm going to go ahead and put some glue on this. And with this, you want to make sure you glue it completely. So what we're going to do is just kind of let this sit here for about 10 minutes before we move to the next step. Okay, so this has been sitting for about 10 minutes or so. So you've already should have placed the positioning holes where we're going to put in the feet. So what you want to do is just kind of reinforce these holes so that you are putting the hole through the actual bag and the stabilizer. So I already have the holes here. Just want to come hook this through. You can use this awl. You can use the leather hole punch. And what I would recommend is definitely, if you're planning to make multiple bags, to kind of invest in one of these. They're probably like $40, $50. I think I paid for this. But I'll look for one that's comparable, and also link that down below as well. In the meantime, they have these awls, which are just super handy. And they're like maybe $3 or $4. I'll also link these. So we can use this. The reason I like using this initially, especially, is because they make a perfectly round hole. So we want to put this all the way through because, again, you're going through not just the leather, but also the stabilizer on the back end. And I like to just put it through a couple times just to make sure it's a nice clean hole. Okay, now we're going to grab these little guys. We're going to grab 4 of them and then 4 of the caps. Okay. All right, let me move this over. All right, so I'm going to work on this side. We're going to go ahead and push those through. Let's move this over. All right, so this is an arbor press. It's a 1-ton arbor press, which I love this thing. You can put on snaps, you can make holes. There's so much you can do with this with just a very little pressure. Because I know in terms of like placing holes in leather and just putting on rivets and things like that, it's kind of a pain in the butt. So I literally have this one tool with different attachments, of course, and you don't have to buy the attachments that go to this, which they don't have many, but they have a lot of things that you can use for this machine, and they have it on Amazon and also on Etsy. So we're going to go ahead and attach. So what you're going to do is you have this side. We're just going to kind of place this on here so that it doesn't fall off. And I have this, which is kind of like a little concave surface so that you don't smash the top of this. You're going to place this here. You're going to fold this over. And I'm going to make sure it's positioned under here. It's that simple. I mean, it's, yeah. Ideally, I should have this mounted, but I'm not sure yet. Because I'm going to be switching my furniture out in here. And so I'm going to wait until I know exactly where I'm going to place it. So we want to do that, and I'll show you what it looks like from this end. Is that simple? So you want to do that for all 3 pieces. Okay, so we have the grommets at the bottom done. Now we're gonna go ahead and grab the handles. So we're gonna grab all 4 pieces of the leather that we've cut, as well as the stabilizer. We're also gonna grab some glue. So with this part, you are going to use glue and not the double-sided tape. Let's grab a dauber. So I'm using leather on one side and then the suede, the corresponding suede on another side. So we're going to put the glue onto the stabilizer. So now we're going to place this on here. And then we're going to go ahead and put glue on this other side here. Alright, and then set that to the side, and we'll do the same thing we did here. Alright, then we're going to put the top layer right on here. You want to try to get it as even as you can. Again, if you're working with a heavier leather, you don't have as much to worry about in terms of it kind of like changing its shape. But this is a softer leather, so you want to make sure you kind of get it as good as possible. But don't worry, if there's like imperfections in here, we're going to go ahead and clean that up after it's dry. Okay. And so then we want to go ahead and let this dry completely and do the same thing over here. Okay, so we're gonna let both of these dry completely. Okay, so once we have it dry, now we wanna go ahead and clean up the edges. So if you're working with a heavier weight leather, 5, 6, 7 ounce leather, cleaning this up and making it extremely neat is a lot easier than with a softer leather. So we're just gonna go in with the X-Acto knife to clean it up, and then to kind of like buff it out a little and kind of smooth it, we're going to use this burnishing machine. Now, if you don't have a burnishing machine, that's perfectly okay. So one side of the burnishing machine, if you need to kind of like trim down some of the edges, you use this side, which is the sandpaper, and the other is the burnishing smoother. If you don't have that, you can use just a regular piece of sandpaper. So yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I talk often about like a thicker leather, a heavier weight leather. Um, these machines are absolutely amazing. They cut off so much time and they just make your makes just look really professional. Um, but you don't necessarily need these. It's going to take a little longer, a little blood, sweat, and tears, but it's the same thing. You can get the result from this, which is just simple sandpaper, as well as this. This is essentially a burnishing tool that's just not motorized. So this is probably like $6 or so, and it'll give you the same result as this. You'll just have to do it manually, as well as burnishing gum. So when you see the edge of a piece of leather that's like shiny and that's well finished, all that is this burnishing gum, the burnishing tool, and just a little buffing with a rag after that. So I will also kind of put links to all of these tools in the description as well. So what we're going to do next is go ahead and stitch. We're going to stitch close to the edge here, in the center, as well as close to the edge around the perimeter. We're going to do that for both sides. Okay, so I think I will do the burnishing on it. So this is a really good burnishing gum. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's Toconol. I will link it, but it's really good because you can do either the leather side or the flesh side, which is like the suede side. So I will go ahead and do that. So with this, you want to, I typically will kind of dilute it. So I'll take a little bit out, put it in here, and put some water in it, and thin it out a bit. And it lasts forever. But I won't do that this time. I'll just go ahead and put this around the edge. And you want to be as careful as you can and try to not get it so much on the suede, just because it will darken it a bit, which is fine because it's going to darken anyway over time, and it gives it more of a kind of like a worn in look. But I'm going to try to resist getting so much on the front. So once I put this on there, I'm going to let it kind of dry a bit. So I'm going to wait like maybe 10 minutes or so, and then I will burnish this off. Okay, so we're gonna let this dry. We're gonna do both handles, let it dry for a bit, and then we'll go ahead and burnish these. Okay, so we have both sides trimmed and burnished. Now what we're gonna do is edge coat the edge, the perimeter, as well as the inside and the bottom. And then allow it to dry for about 30 minutes or so. Okay, so while the handle edge coat is drying, let's grab the lining and the lining bands, which are these two pieces. So you should have already marked where the hardware placement is going to go on the bottom of the lining band. And what we're going to do now is we're going to stitch the lining band to the lining. So I always recommend, even if the lining band. So I'm using a suede now, which kind of corresponds with the outer leather that I'm using. But if you're using a harder outer leather, I would recommend for your lining band to use something that's a little softer, not like a 5, 6, 7 ounce, because it'll be a little difficult to stitch that if you're using a home machine to the lining. So just use a color that like works well with the outer fabric, but something that's thinner that you can attach to the actual lining. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and stitch. This is the wrong side of the lining. And we're going to stitch and then kind of finger press it over. We're going to do that on both sides. So we have the band connected to the lining. Now what you want to do is you want to take your pocket. So I only cut one pocket, but the pattern states for 2, but I'm just simply using the 1. So you want to go ahead and place the pocket. And the pattern also lets you know like the pattern placement, but it's pretty self-explanatory. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to stitch around the perimeter, of course leaving the top open. I recommend using some type of like either pigskin or suede for the pocket. It looks nicer. It holds up a little longer as well. So when you're stitching the ends here, you want to make sure you reinforce the stitch in the corners. Okay, so we have the pocket installed, and now what we want to do is go ahead and install the magnets. So you want to install the magnets on the outside of the lining band. So you should have already had your placement in here. I'm going to go ahead. And just to ensure that it didn't shift anywhere, we want to go ahead and just kind of clip the sides together. Okay, so now what you want to do after you have the hardware attached at the band, you want to turn this inside out and you want to stitch. Make sure you line these side seams up and the top seams up.
Motion detected at front door.
We're going to go ahead and stitch these on both sides. Okay, so once you stitch this, what you want to do now is trim these off and then take the sides, flatten those, and stitch across the bottom. Make sure you reinforce the corners.
Motion detected at front door.
Okay, so we have the lining constructed. So let's just go ahead and set this to the side. And let's grab the handles, which at this point have dried. So what we're going to do, on the pattern, there are markings. There's going to be the two markings in the corner and then the marking like in the mid center here. Make sure you have the markings already punched and simply for placement purposes. And then we're going to, because we want to be able to have the screw post inserted. So which means the hole needs to be large enough. Again, I spoke about this arbor press, which is an absolute lifesaver. If you don't have one, you can still just kind of use your awl and maneuver the post into the leather. Okay, so once you have the holes punched in the handle, what you want to do is you want to find the center. And the placement is where the rounded part here, you want it to meet up with the top. So there's none of the actual band that's kind of sticking over. It's going to meet right here at the top. And then you can go ahead and clamp that in. And so now what we're going to do is just stitch. We're going to stitch on these pre-existing stitch line right here, right across the bottom, only on this part. So you're just going to stitch right across the bottom, making sure you don't stitch through the holes you just punched, but stitch through the bottom. And you're going to do this for the opposite side as well. So the exact same thing. You're going to go ahead and punch the holes, and then clamp this there, and then stitch across the bottom on the other side as well. Okay, so we have the stitching completed on each side. Now what you want to do is you want to take your awl and you want to poke it through that hole all the way through. Now, if you're using a heavier weight leather, what you can do is the same process that we took to get the holes here, you want to do the same thing. And you can simply, if you have a tool, just kind of set it on here and it'll poke through both of them. Or you can bend it back and do it. But at this point, what we want to do is take, we want to take the rivets and you only want to do the rivets for the two ends. So what you want to do is you want to do these two and then the two on the other side as well. Okay, so we have the rivets installed. Now what we want to do is we want to take the back, turn it inside out, and we're going to stitch it the same way we did the lining. So adding or lining the sides up exactly. All right, and then go ahead and stitch down the sides. Okay, so we have the bag, the outer bag stitched. Now what you want to do is you want to take the side seams and you want to press them with your finger as much as you can. And once you do that, you then want to go and the stitch lines that you have stitched here, you want to stitch over these stitch lines. And you want to do that on both sides. And what that's doing is it's flattening the seam. So you want to do that on both sides. What you could do prior, especially if you're using a thicker leather, you want to take a really heavy clip and you want to let it sit on here. And maybe sit on here for like 10 minutes or so and then stitch. And you want to do the same thing to the lining. So you want to flatten the lining out. You may even be able to do, depending on what you're using, if you're using a canvas and a suede, you can also kind of do a quick steam to flatten it out. And so for the lining, you don't have the stitch lines that go across the top. So what you want to do is you just want to stitch down the side seam only from where the lining and the upper band meet. So from here to here on each side. And again, it just flattens it out. So when you put it together, it'll be a lot nicer on these sides. Okay, so we have the sides stitched and flat. Now what we want to do is just kind of take your awl and the pre-existing hole that we already met, we want to just punch it all the way through. And you'll be punching through the leather outer part. Just take it all the way through. And you want to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so now what you want to do is go ahead and turn the lining inside out. And then place it inside the bag. So you want to make sure you have the magnets lined up, and you want it center right here. And just take and put a clip here. Now line up the side seams. Okay, so now what you want to do is check and double check just to make sure that it's all flush all the way around. And then you want to stitch, but what you want to do is you want to stitch in this first pre-existing stitch all the way around. Okay, so we have the lining stitched in. Now what we want to do is go ahead and clean up the top. So there's a couple options that you have, and it all depends on what type of fabric or leather you're using. If you're using like a veg tan or like a thicker leather, I would recommend doing the same process we did with the handles. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and just make sure everything is even, and then I'm going to use edge coat on it. Probably maybe sand it down a bit because you want to make sure it's nice and flush. So we're going to go ahead and finish the top, and then the last part is we're going to make sure the handles, we're going to put in the hardware here for the handles on this side as well. So let's go ahead and clean the top off, and then we're going to edge coat it. Okay, so we have the top edge coated. Now what you want to do is you have the hole that you created here, as well as the hole that's in this band. And now you want to create another hole in the lining band. So just kind of push it all the way through. and then you want to install the ribbon. Okay, and do the same thing to the other side. Okay, and that is it. We are finished. If you have any questions, any comments, concerns, let me know. Happy sewing.